The following encounter happened to me this week. Note, I'm a male in his mid-30s, and English is not my first language. I remember feeling sick to my stomach, while tears ran down my cheeks into my beard. I was sitting in my car on the side of the highway at around midnight, in between two major cities in Europe. Maybe less than an hour earlier, I had fought bitterly with my girlfriend. We both got mad at each other. She got passive-aggressive, and I began to yell at her. I couldn't even stand to be with her that evening, so I got my keys, slammed the door, and drove off to my apartment in another city. I had to take a little break during my drive home. The episode with my girlfriend woke emotions that were too great for me to ignore, so I stood there on the highway with my blinking light and no engine turned on. It was silent around me except the occasional truck passing by and the constant clicking of the blinking light. My body was tight, and my mind ran through the escapade again and again. I hate when that happens, so I decided to continue driving. I turned the key, but I couldn't turn it all the way. I was surprised to find that I couldn't turn the key all the way to start the engine. I tried again and again, but nothing. The key was stuck in the same position. I was stubborn and kept trying, but to no avail. Thoughts of staying my night on the highway rushed to the forefront of my mind. Why? Because I foolishly forgot to grab my cell phone as I was storming out of the apartment. Now I had no means to contact the emergency service or roadside assistance. Now the clicking of the blinking light was like a constant blow. I shut it off, and I realized for the first time just how dark it was around me. Trucks passed me by within the following minutes, but I didn't want to step out of my car and wave one of the drivers over. I had a feeling that I shouldn't trust them. Don't ask me why. I always hate when people freeze in the midst of a situation that requires action, so I took a step out of my car. It was raining a little bit. Obviously I knew where I was since I regularly drive on that highway back and forth, and I knew that 2 kilometers ahead was a highway exit. I figured I would walk on the side of the highway up to that exit where there's a gas station, and hope that it would still be open, even shortly after midnight. I closed my car and began walking on the other side of the guardrail away from the road. The road was on my left, and trees illuminated by moonlight were on my right. I confess I was scared, very much so. I had no particular reason to be afraid, but my mind turned to the shadows from the trees and to men hiding there, watching me with intense-looking eyes and hands ready to grab me. After 15 minutes or so, I began to move up a small hill, and the rain turned into snow. It was snowing for a while there, because the earth and the trees were already covered in white. After yet even more time, I finally saw the exit in the distance. I reached it faster than I thought I would. I had miscalculated how far it was, but that was alright. I was happy to be so close to light, people, and a phone that I could use. Right before the exit, there was a bridge that went over the highway. When I was about to pass under it, I saw a lone person jogging. I stopped and looked up in surprise. I could only make out a silhouette, yet I clearly saw a woman, ponytail, small and athletic, crossing the bridge. What woman would want to jog around midnight on a road close to a highway, with a wooded area on both sides of a bridge? Seconds later, she was gone. I looked to see if I could make her out within the darkness, but I couldn't. Still weirded out, I continued walking and passed under the bridge. A couple meters further down the highway, I took the exit. Now, in order to take the exit by foot, I had to get over the guardrail because there were thick bushes too close to the side of it that I was on. So basically, I was walking on the road down the exit to the gas station. On the right side of me, behind the bushes, there was a trail. If you decided to walk up that trail, you'd arrive back at the bridge I mentioned. So I was walking down the exit road slowly because it was slippery, but also with a steady pace because I didn't want to get hit by a passing car. And then it happened. Somebody jumped on me from behind and pushed me face first into the ground in the middle of the road. I screamed in sudden terror and tried to turn around, ignoring the pain in my chin and right ear. The person was standing on their feet again. I looked on in shock and surprise. It was a woman in her mid-20s wearing jogging attire, the same person I saw minutes earlier on the bridge. She shrieked with wide eyes and saliva dripping out of her mouth, and she charged me again. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my left eye. The woman scratched over my eyes and poked her fingers deep into my left eyeball. I stumbled backwards, and when she tried to charge at me again, I threw her against the guardrail with her back first. The sound of the impact alone made me cringe. I broke down in the middle of the road, clutching my left eye. Moments passed, but I wasn't attacked again. I could feel all of the pain welling up in my eye. I looked up, and through tears in both of my eyes, I saw the woman heading up the trail towards the bridge again, fast. Adrenaline shot through my body. The pain felt numb as I rushed down the exit road, falling on my ass several times during the process. I was panicking. I just wanted to escape that place. I reached the gas station finally, basically jumping against the door to throw it open. The guy behind the counter was shocked seeing me. I was bleeding, and my eye was basically swollen shut at that point. To make a long story short, the guy called the police and an ambulance. The officers searched the area, but they never found anybody. I am at home now, in the apartment that I inhabit alone, and still pretty scared. I can't comprehend why some random woman would just attack me, but I know for certain that she went for a run in the middle of the night just to find a victim like me. When I was 11, we, my single mom, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother, moved into a beautiful older craftsman-style house. I'd heard it was around 80 years old back then in 1984. Soon after we moved in, we found out it was infested with cockroaches. I've never seen anything like it. You'd turn on the lights at night, and they'd scatter from every surface. We had to store all our food that wasn't canned in the fridge, so they wouldn't be able to get into it. We tried bug bombs and professional exterminators numerous times, but with no effect. Those things really can survive a nuclear war. Anyway, they weren't the reason we lived in the house less than a year before fleeing for our lives. I remember my mom discussing our next-door neighbor's creepy son with my grandma. He was in his 20s or 30s. She'd been doing dishes one day and looked up to see him standing directly on the other side of the kitchen window, staring in at her. Normally she would have kept something scary like this from us kids, but about that time, she told us to tell her if we ever saw him near the house, and that we weren't allowed to play outside. She also told us about a couple of times when she woke up to see him standing over her bed, and one time he put a cloth with chemicals over her face to try and knock her out. And this is the part of the story I know the least about, since she didn't tell us about it until years later. I think she might have thought she was dreaming, especially if he had been drugging her. I don't know if anything else ever happened. I never asked her about it in case something did, and it brought up bad memories. So one afternoon, we were all doing some spring cleaning, when my brother said he found a cigarette butt in the upstairs toilet. Weird, since nobody in our family smokes. And being a dumb little 6-year-old, he flushed it before telling our mom. I still remember her trying to get the entire story out of him, being upset that the evidence was gone, and thinking he might have maybe been mistaken, or maybe he'd picked up a butt somewhere outside out of curiosity. She soon dropped it, and we tried to mostly forget about it. I think it was a few weeks later. My brother was spending the night at our grandparents', and my sister and I were the only ones upstairs. Our mom's bedroom was downstairs. My sister heard a sound like a screen door slamming, but insisted it came from in the house, and she was freaked out. I told her it was just from outside and to go to sleep, but about a minute later, we heard a strangled cough coming from just outside our bedroom door. A man's cough, and it sounded like he was trying hard to keep from making noise. I whispered that we needed to get downstairs. We sneaked out of the room and I had the irrational urge to turn on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the hall from our bedroom, to check to see if anyone was there. And then I felt just as strong of a feeling to get away from the bathroom and get downstairs now. And the scariest moment of my life was when we were creeping down the stairs in the pitch black. It was a spiral enclosed stairway with walls, the perfect place for somebody to hide. The stairway light was burned out, and the wood steps were creaky, so it was terrifying making our way down. We got downstairs and woke up our mom, panicked that there was a guy upstairs in our bathroom. She started to tell us to go back to bed, but she could see that we were seriously scared. She went over to the bottom of the stairway to go up and show us there was nothing to be scared about. But then she had just as strong of a feeling to close the stairway door and lock it now. She did, called the cops, but they never found anything and didn't take it very seriously. The next day, she called a PD detective friend of hers from high school to come over and inspect the house. Remembering the cigarette butt in the toilet, she had him look at the upstairs bathroom window. It was a high, narrow rectangular window, not very big but just wide enough for a person. Who knows how many times the intruder climbed up our roof to get in and was upstairs while we were sleeping across the hall. The window swung up on hinges. When my mom's friend let the window drop, it sounded just like a screen door slamming. He said the locks on all the windows were so old they were practically useless, and we needed to get out of the house immediately. We moved into my grandparents' that day. When my mom went with her brothers a few days later to pack up some things, a back door had been smashed open, but nothing in the house was disturbed or stolen. A few years later, we heard the neighbor's son was arrested for rape and attempted murder. I wonder what might have happened if I had turned on the bathroom light that night, if my mom didn't lock the stairway door, or if we didn't leave the house when we did. My dad worked at a beachside bar and grill when I was little. In addition to being a chef, he ran and DJ'd the bike and car shows for the restaurant. The car shows were usually on Wednesdays, and the bike nights were on Friday. The car shows were on a school night, so I was rarely allowed to go, but my father would often bring me to the bike nights. By all accounts, I was an adorable and pretty mellow kid, and the bikers absolutely loved me. And yes, you might say this was no environment for a little girl, but I learned a lot about loyalty and friendship from being around bikers. My dad told me that some of them would call into the restaurant just to ask if I would be there that week, and they'd often bring me stuffed animals and candy. My favorite of the bikers was a man that I affectionately called Uncle Teddy. He was a friend of my parents and an absolute mountain of a man, around 6'8" and 400 pounds easily. He was an ex-Marine who loved his Harley and his cigars, and every week for 5 years he would bring me a Butterfinger and a Beanie Baby. I was 6 years old the night it happened in 2003. My father had brought me to the bike show as he normally did, but I couldn't keep my eyes open past 8 p.m. The show didn't end until 10, so my dad had gotten into the habit of putting me into an air mattress in the back of the restaurant, and he and Teddy would check in on me every 15 minutes. I was asleep when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was a man that I'd seen around before, and he wasn't dressed in biker gear. He was wearing a short-sleeved plaid shirt and jeans, and looked greasy but not particularly scary. He smiled at me and told me his name was Sean, and that he was a friend of my dad's. He said that my dad had asked him to drive me home. My parents tried to ingrain stranger danger into me, and they told me 1,000 times over to never talk to anyone I didn't know. But he knew mine and my dad's name, as well as the nickname everyone called me. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I got up, grabbed the flamingo Beanie Baby Uncle Teddy had given me, and started to walk towards the parking lot. Sean didn't have a bike. He had a very old 4-door sedan. He opened up the back door for me and I climbed inside. You know how in senior citizens' homes they often have plastic-wrapped couches or chairs? That's what the back seat of his car was like, totally covered in plastic. I think now that it was probably there so there would be no trace of DNA left behind. Sean started to drive away, and to this day I can't believe how lucky I got. He had parked the car behind the restaurant in a way that it wasn't immediately visible to the bike show, but as we pulled away, I saw Teddy heading through the door, presumably to check on me. He just happened to look up at that exact moment, probably to acknowledge the car, and I smiled at him. Uncle Teddy didn't waste a moment, didn't even stop to tell my dad what was going on. He got on his bike and was on that car's ass before we had even totally cleared the avenue that led out of the parking lot. The avenue that you had to take to get to the restaurant was long, about 1.5 miles, and then you could go down another long road before you made it to the highway. Sean saw Teddy approaching his rear view and attempted to speed up, but he must have realized it was futile. He'd been seen, and Teddy had his license plate number and a good description. Sean stopped the car, turned around, and told me very calmly to get out. I was scared by this point, and I didn't waste a moment climbing out and running to Teddy. Sean burnt rubber driving away, and Teddy held me for a moment before putting me on the back of his bike and taking me back to my dad. By the time we got back, cops had been called and they were surrounding the place. A lot of the show had emptied out, and my dad was sobbing and screaming on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. I'll never forget that moment. I ran up to him and hugged him as tightly as I could, and then the rest is all a blur. I talked to the cops. I talked to my dad. I even went down to the station and spoke to a sketch artist. I didn't get home until around 2 a.m., and Teddy never left my side. An APB was put out on the vehicle, which had been reported as stolen. The sketch circulated around the local news stations, but it never turned up anything concrete. At one point, I was asked to look at a lineup, but none of them were him. Fast forward about 8 years. I was 14, and my dad had decided I was old enough to know what happened. Sean had been spotted lurking around the bike show a few times before that night, and was a customer at the restaurant fairly regularly. He knew my nickname because he had been watching me for over a month. He knew my schedule, and consequently how often Teddy and my dad checked up on me. When his evil plan was botched and Teddy brought me back to the show, everyone had left. I assumed it was because the police had been investigating a crime scene, but I was wrong. They were all out looking for Sean. Teddy told them the make and model of the car, with the description of Sean, and one of the guys thought that he sounded like a guy that frequented one of the biker bars downtown. I remember my dad paused for a long time, and I asked him what happened after that. "They found him," he said. So this happened tonight at work, and everybody is pretty shaken up over it, as I think some next-level horror movie shit happened this evening. Some background info. I'm in nursing school and work part-time on the weekends at a retail store, home decor, furniture, and whatnot. We have about 20 employees. Only 3 of them are men. Most customers don't realize we have 3 men that work at the store. We constantly hear, "Y'all need to hire some men to help move that furniture around." Tonight, me, another associate, a manager, all of us female, and our stockroom maintenance guy who doesn't leave the stockroom were working the closing shift. We were scheduled to close at around 9, but shut the store down just before 8 because of this incident. The other associate and I are in the register area, straightening things up before close and shooting the shit because there are no customers in the store. The last customers that came had left about 45 minutes prior to this time. The phone rings suddenly. My coworker answers the phone, puts it on hold, and calls out for the manager. The caller wants to speak to them. Our manager comes up, answers the phone, and gets a weird look on her face. My boss is a badass of a woman who doesn't get shaken up easily. I watched a customer get 2 inches from her face, call her a fucking cunt, and watched her throw her head back and laugh before telling them to get out. So seeing her with this strange look, my coworker and I stop and listen. She puts the caller on hold, points to me and says, come to the office with me," in a quick, nervous tone. As we're walking to the office, she tells me that the caller is a man, says he's from corporate, and that there's been an incident. He told her to go into the manager's office to talk on the phone, but she feels like something isn't quite right and wants someone to listen in on the call, sort of like a witness. Now, our manager's office is inside of our stockroom. Our stockroom is entirely concrete and stacked with merchandise. There are no windows in the stockroom or my manager's office. My coworker is on the sales floor continuing to work. Our stock guy is in the stockroom putting furniture together outside the office door, and my boss and I are in the office with the door open. She takes the guy off hold and puts the phone on speaker. This is about how the conversation went. "Hello, I'm calling from corporate. There's been an incident at another store with an irate customer. I need you to speak to him, but don't make him mad." The call is quiet for a few seconds. Then what sounds like the same man from corporate comes back on, obviously pretending to be someone else. "What's your name?" My boss says her first name. "What's your last name?" She gives the first initial of her last name. "How old are you?" "Who is this? I'd like to speak with the man from corporate." Do you know what I do to people who make me fucking mad? My boss and I stare at each other. She quietly stands up from her chair. The minute she stands up, mind you, she stood up quietly and slowly. The caller says, "Why are you standing up?" My boss quietly picks up a permanent marker and throws it through the doorway at our stock guy, trying to get his attention. The second she throws the marker, the caller says, "And why are you trying to get his attention?" The stockroom has no windows. The only way the caller could have seen my boss stand up and throw the marker was if he was in the stockroom or watching through the office security cameras. My boss slammed the phone down. We must have had some sort of unspoken immediate understanding, because we both bolted out of the office, out of the stockroom and onto the sales floor. We ripped the front doors shut, locked them, and yelled at the other associate to get in the office now. We slid a couch in front of the doors and bolted back to the office. Me, my boss, the other associate, and our stock guy all ran in there, slammed the door and locked it. I grabbed the phone and called 911. My boss, who has a license to carry, pulls out a 9mm handgun out of her purse and stands next to the office door while I'm talking to the dispatcher. The police are there, beating on the front doors in about 5 minutes. We can see this on the security camera TV feed in the office, so my boss grabs her ID and gun license out of her wallet, opens the door, and we shut and lock it behind her. We watch her on the security cameras walking through the store and letting the police in. 3 cops search the entire area. Bathrooms, register, walls, break room, office, and stockroom. They even climb up onto the merchandise shelves that go up to the ceiling and search. They have 2 patrol cars drive through the shopping plaza, front and back, and they even check our dumpsters. They don't find anyone suspicious inside or out. We called corporate and relayed the story on speaker with the police. No one from corporate had called us. There was no incident at any other store. They insisted that it was a prank call until they hear the "why are you standing and why are you trying to get his attention" part. The police and us at the store insist that someone has hacked the security cameras. We have Wi-Fi that's password protected and we don't know the password, so maybe they used that. We don't know, but the only way the caller could have seen my boss stand up from the chair and toss a marker is if there was a guy in our stockroom or watching the security camera live feed. They insist that that's impossible. So, tech people, what are your 2 cents in this security camera business? And all others, what are your inputs? What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. I know I said I was going to start putting out videos more regularly, but wouldn't you know it, something happened right after I said that. So as for a little bit of an update as for why I haven't posted any videos for about the last week and a half, Turns out that my YouTube account and my AdSense both got hacked by some random guy. So I had to get in contact with Google and get that all taken care of, and we're still getting it sorted out. But at this point, I've regained control of my account, and I can start posting videos again. So thank you guys for being so patient and bearing with me through all this craziness. There's been a lot going on lately, but I'm gonna try my best to get back to a normal schedule now that all of this is finally over. If you guys liked the video, please feel free to leave a like, comment some feedback, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you'd like to contact me, or if you'd like to send in a story you'd like me to read, or one that you have yourself, please be sure to look in the description of the video below for all of my social media. This includes my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter. I try to check them all as often as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please make sure to include in the title or subject what the type of story is, if it has any, how you'd like to be credited in the description of the video it appears in, and what the title of your story is. If you guys are curious at all about the music used in this video, please be sure to look in the description as well. I always have the music tracks that I use listed in the order which they appear in the video, and I have a link to the artists as well, so that you can go ahead and check out more of their work if you like the stuff that you hear in the video. Last but not least, if you guys really like my content and you feel like you'd like to support my channel, please be sure to take a look in the description and click on my Patreon link. It's basically a tip jar for creators, so if you feel so inclined, you can make a small donation for the channel. It'll never be required or anything like that, it's just for those of you who feel like you'd like to give more to the channel. And any help in that department is always appreciated, so please be sure to take a look at that if you guys are interested. If you guys have any constructive criticism on what I can do better in my videos, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.